Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, perfect. Thank you. Good morning. So we're going to be discussing the creative economy right now. And that is a sector much more than just creating content. It's a $500 billion engine of global influence. However, we're currently facing what I call an innovation deficit. Women influence over 85% of consumer spending globally, yet we remain the end users of technology rather than the architects of it. To reach the Equality Moonshot, which is the theme we're celebrating in this house today, we have to move from being the primary consumers to being the primary creators. Hello, everyone. I'm Ayati Dashkar. I'm an 8th grade student. I'm the Global Youth Ambassador for the Hydesium and UNESCO Foundation in Switzerland. I'm also the Global Youth Lead for the World Women Foundation, and I'm the host of Girls Talk STEM. Thank you, everyone. And today's panel brings together the voices leading that transition of the creative economy, and we're joined by by Professor Sally Numa, who is going to be our moderator today. Please join our panelists and speakers.
No worries. Thank you. Good morning. Okay, so we are very excited to have a very important panel on the intersections of creativity, gender, and economics. So I am going to invite our panelists to join us. We have DERYA MATRAS, the Vice President, EMEA MEHTA, MASOOM MEHTA, a fashion entrepreneur, influencer, and investor, and NABILA ABULJADAYEL, who's a Saudi artist, award-winning director, and Goodwill ambassador. All of these important and beautiful people are going to join us on this stage now to be able to discuss this really important topic around creativity. Come on, let's join. You can sit. All right, thank you all so much for joining. As was said in the introduction, this is a trillion-dollar economy, but oftentimes gender is an interesting part of this discussion because women operate at the sort of informal sector, right, as it pertains to a lot of the jobs within the space. But it's possible that creativity could be used as a mechanism of social mobility. So I actually want to start by jumping right into that and to talk about how can we engage or ensure that we're developing structures where the creative economy is not just this informal sort of behind the scenes aspect for women, but is actually a mechanism for social mobility for women. And this is for everyone. So we can just go down the panels and we can sort of get your contributions from your perspective on that question.
So I think structural changes that could really make a difference here is, one, more transparent algorithm systems. I think that's something that platforms are majorly lacking today. And I think the second is better revenue sharing from the platforms, right? So I think there is the creative economy, which consists of obviously this ecosystem of creators and the platforms and the community. But I think the relationship between the creators and the platforms could actually help us make this a much more inclusive space.
Hi, my name is NABILA ABULJADAYEL. I'm an artist, director, and producer and a Goodwill ambassador of King Salman Relief Center and a co-founder of SARIAN Productions. And I agree with you, and I think as an artist, a fundamental change should be in how and when we recognize a creative value. Let's say, for example, in sports, we see athletes peak in their 20s, 30s, and that's not the same with artists, because I've witnessed firsthand with my sister, Kariman Abuljadayel, who's here with us. Her career expanded in her early 20s, and she was the first Saudi female to participate in the Olympics as in the Rio 2016 Olympics, and she represented Saudi Arabia. She did that at the age of 22. So her talent is nurtured early, celebrated early, and moving from there, her journey continued. But as artists, it's different. We're not celebrated early. It's the other way around. It's later in life, or I don't want to say it, but after death. I was actually told it is very rare while you celebrate your art while you're alive. And that's not very encouraging, but we need to change that and how we perceive the value of art early in life. We need early investment, early recognition, and just the courage to change the systematic problem that the value becomes more valuable with age. So we need to recognize talent even more earlier, so we would have that flourishing career.
Absolutely. Please start.
I have so many things. I don't know. Is it working? Yes. I have so many things to say. Great points from both of you. Thank you very much. So, as you say, creator economy is huge. Creator economy is potentially like $250 billion economy. And the way that the algorithms work is transparent to an extent, both to men and women. The challenge I think that women find is you need to trial and error and optimize and take risks to find out like what is the optimal point. I think as women we are less good in that, trial and error and taking risk and asking. And that is what we should be encouraging. And I see it through different creators, like not, even if maybe half of the creators are women, you see that male creators are earning, more than women, etc. And I think there's the entire ecosystem from how we are funding businesses, like how much money entrepreneurs are raising. There's a massive difference between men and women. I believe women only are raising 3% of the global VC funding, and not only 3%, but they're raising potentially half compared to the male average. And that is like going through the entire digital ecosystem. And the thing is, as AI is taking such an important part, in disrupting so many industries, including the creative industry, empowering women to take more risks, obviously with the funding and the supporters to back up. It could be an entrepreneurial economy or corporate economy is very important, but also we know that AI is not going to, it might automate the creative, but it won't automate the creativity. So I do believe that there's a massive opportunity for women to tap into what AI won't be able to replace, the empathy, the creativity, the more the human elements. And I think if we can encourage women to use the latest technologies with confidence, with more risk-taking and trial and error, we can tap into the magic that we can bring to the table with the creativity and the multitasking and empathy and all the things that we are better at.
Absolutely. I love that there's already been solutions. I hope people are taking notes. We heard here about the algorithms playing an important role, also about perception of the value of art over time, and then also about belief and confidence and being able to pursue those opportunities. So I think that's really great. I want to shift us to talking a little bit about maybe the role of government. What do we think is the role of sort of state government, of these public apparatuses for being able to enable women to take advantage of the creative economy?
Okay, maybe I'll start.
Okay.
For example, in my country, Saudi Arabia, we've implemented the economy, the creative economy in our government plan, and we're seeing its growth and its amazing results. And that is because they're taking it seriously. The creative economy is taken seriously, and the creatives are being taken seriously. So, but I always say that we start as individuals, and we should always support each other first, and then it comes the bigger entity. So women should support other women, and that continues, and we create that economy and we create that community for order to have a better result for others to see what we're doing and to trust us.
I'll never tire of hearing women support other women. That's important, very key. Please. Do you have anything to add?
No, please go ahead.
So I think when we look at government impact or institutional impact and we speak about it, and I completely agree with you that we need to support each other as women. But I do feel like being here in Davos for WEF, I think let's talk about policies and let's talk about what institutions can do over and above kind of what we can do on a personal level. But at an institutional level, from a government, I think creative IP needs to be classified as an asset class. I think this is what could bring incredible change in how the creative economy runs, especially for women, right? Today, we are creating with depth. We are controlling culture. But how much of that is really being evaluated the way it should be evaluated, right? So who gets the funding?
Oops, sorry.
Sorry. Who gets the funding? Products get the funding. Platforms get the funding. Patents get the funding. Just think about it, right? But what happens to a musician's catalog? What happens to a creator's content IP? What happens to a brand's equity or design? That's kind of considered as intangible, undependable, not reliable enough. And I think if we change that perspective, it could really help us kind of help women actually own their soft power and the depth of community that women are actually able to build today.
It's true.
I agree with the intellectual property point, and I think that's one of the foundations of economies that thrive. And particularly for the creative industry, it's extremely important, also for science and everything. I think in addition to that, education, I think, is the most important one for me. Because if you think about where the world is moving toward, we are digitalization is accelerating, particularly with the disruption of AI. And there is a big gender gap in how many women go into more technical and like engineering, like STEM fields. And doesn't matter if it's creative economy or it's life sciences or corporate ecosystem. It will be very important that women feel more and more confident with using the technology. And I think we can build that confidence from very early years in the education by moving more girls into STEM fields and building programs to support more girls and young women going into these areas, role modeling and sponsorship and women networks, and in order to support them both to step into the work, their careers, could be as an entrepreneur or as an in the corporate life. But then there are few drop points when they start their careers, even if they study engineering. I think at the university level, the gender gap is not as high, but when they step into their careers, there's a big drop in in the entrepreneurial space, in the funding and the VC ecosystem, or if they go to corporate jobs in the childbearing years, like how many women actually drop out, and the gender gap like suddenly widens. I think on those like critical points, we need government policies to support more women so that we can get into leadership positions and more successful positions that women can drive impact.
Absolutely. I love that you brought in the really important data about there not being a gap, right, in competency at all.
Yeah.
It's once people enter into these spaces of careers where we see those systemic barriers create these gaps. And one question up that I wanted to follow up with, and then we'll move into some individual questions for you all, is in certain industries you can understand potentially the gap, like mining, right? We can see why physically there may be areas where there's barriers for women to succeed in those areas. But in the creative economy, there's potentially an opportunity to eliminate the gaps that we see in areas of STEM or in areas of mining or something like that. Can you share a little bit about how the creative economy specifically could be an area where we eliminate gender barriers because of the fact that it's potentially more accessible? You know, what is the opportunities that we can get from the creative economy specifically that we may not get in other industries as it pertains to gender?
I actually loved what you said about capital, and I think that specifically is what drives a business at the end of the day, right? And I think we can't put blinders on that. So actually just being able to have capital that's, and I'm going to say this again and again, but long-term capital for women creators in a way that their creative IPs are not considered intangible. There's value attached to that creativity, and that culture that's built with community would be a game changer.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Anything to add?
With the creative economy, I think, like as artists, especially female artists, I think it's very important that we start at home, and we share that ecosystem at home, and then we build up to community in a bigger umbrella. And I think when we develop each other as individuals, we have better results. And I'll give you an example. Like we, as individuals, like creative individuals, everyone here, we're here at the World Women Davos Agenda, and that's an amazing platform to speak and to be heard, and for our voices to reach louder. And I think the CEO, Rupa Dash, and we see her doing an amazing job. And also, we see her daughter, and Ayati is a youth leader, but also I see that ecosystem growing from individuals to a bigger picture. And that's what we need exactly. And just a quick story, like I went to the Asir region, it's the southern region in Saudi Arabia, and it's where my mother is from. And there is a beautiful tree that I saw. It's a ragaa tree. It's called a ragaa, and it's 900 years old, and it's considered as the oldest tree in Saudi. So I always remember that tree because I remember my mother from that tree, because she offers shade for those, for others, shade of strength and simplicity. And if we always remember that when we plant a tree that we might not sit in that shade, our work, if there is sincerity in our work, it moves for those who are after us. And we should always consider doing work that is sincere, and that because if our efforts are sincere, it will endure for those after us.
Yes. I love the diversity of this panel, because you're like creative IP and funding, you know, and you're like, you know, we need to really work together, and it starts at home.
Yes.
And be a shade for one another. And I think we need all of those things. I actually have a specific question for you, DERYA, so I'm going to, if it's okay, ask that. So you know, engage in sort of digital, you know, platforms and technologies. Can you talk a little bit about how digital platforms and emerging technologies enable more equitable access to leadership, specifically within the creative industry?
Yes, and actually I was going to add that perspective because I believe it is such an exciting time for the creative industry. Like the amount of tools that we have right now, like the Gen AI tools. I mean, MEHTA has them, and you know, all the tech platforms have them, and the ideas are just endless. And the challenge, and I do believe that these technologies are going to be leveling the playing field for everyone, for women. This is an important time that also women can bridge that gap. We just need to increase the confidence in being able to play with these tools. Somebody said something interesting the other day, said that AI is not going to replace humans. People who use AI are going to replace humans. So I think it just applies to the creative industry and creative tools as well, right? Like the more confident you get and the more creativity you will be able to, come up with. And all the previous stuff that we talked about that are structural, like how confident we are to raise capital. Also, yes, we need to have more women in the VCs. We know that like when there's a woman partner, there's like 2 or 3 times more likelihood of financing and investing in a woman founder, etc. All of those structural things should be in place. We need to have like more education programs, both at the vocational education and at the K-12 education level, but also for women to take more risks, and other women have already gotten there to be vulnerable, to share their experiences and support other women so that we can actually make that step. And I'll give you one example. Obviously, even if I work in a tech company, there's a new tool being introduced every single day, and I haven't been like playing with all different types of technology and apps every day. And when we had these new systems that we can use, like I had the fear of, okay, will I be able to do it? Will I be able to code again, or will I be able to like make the transition? And, the moment I had that feeling, I took a week off. I said, I'm going to do it because I've done many things that I thought I couldn't do before, and I'm going to just tackle everything that scares me. So then I started asking my friends or engineers in the company, and like, how do you do it? They said, you just have to play with it. I'm like, no, it's not what I want. I want a framework of 1, 2, 3. You have to do this. No. They said, you just have to play with it. And then asking AI to teach me things when I don't know, and actually like using as a tutor, as a mentor, very quickly in a few days, I was so confident. And then fast forward here in Davos, I was with a friend, a woman executive, and actually like she was vulnerable enough to share with me, actually, I'm so scared, like I won't be able to make the leap. I said, exactly, I felt like that. And I think we should be sharing these experiences more. All of us feel the fear, will I be able to catch up, or will I be, fall behind? And especially with young women, because they don't know if they should be sharing their vulnerabilities, but when they see us sharing, it's just, they will reach out more, they will take risk. It's risky, right? Like there's risk of judgment, but I think it's really important that we just take the leap of faith and jump into it and figure out like what are the best technologies and tools that are going to amplify our creativity.
That was really, I think, a lot of great examples, and I think we can all relate to that fear and concerns around confidence. I want to circle back to you, MASOOM, and you've talked about it, but we can expand on it a bit more and talk about, fashion and digital influence are powerful economic engines, especially today and online, in person, yet women struggle to scale those industries globally. So you'll often see that women that's some of their first entrepreneurial kinds of endeavors. But to take it from sort of that smaller scale to the global scale that we're talking about is difficult. Can you talk a little bit about how women could potentially make that transition and what's needed?
So, echoing what you said earlier, the Forbes 2025 report says that in the top creators, only 20% are women. And this is a stark difference, right? We're talking about a 2080. But why? We know how to build scale. We know how to build scale as well as men do. And we know how to take that risk. I just think when we take the risk, women are far more penalized for taking that risk. And that's where the misstep is happening. And let me explain with a personal story, right? You guys need to picture this. I'm 21 years old. I've had a blog of my own for a couple of years. I've built a really strong community. It was about 50,000 people at that point, which felt like the whole universe in my hands. And I have this incredible idea where I can actually convert my readers into buying customers. That's a really solid business and revenue model. And I'm sitting in front of an investor and I'm making this pitch, and I tell him this amazing idea of having my own e-commerce brand to bring this to life. And he looks at me and he says, but you're 21 years old. You're going to get married in a few years, and then you're going to have children. And a woman's life, especially in India, changes after she gets married. Now, I've had the grit to bounce back after that, and which is why I have the privilege of sitting with you all today. But what about all the women that hear this no and are never able to move ahead from it, are never able to actually give their dreams a chance after hearing that one singular no that could shatter their universe? And I think this is where I think structural changes could make a difference, right? And I think I completely agree with both of you, and I would actually think that a combination of everything that we're saying would be so impactful. And if I had to break it down, I think these are the three things that would make a world of a difference. When we're talking about the creative economy and women, we can't just talk about the creative economy. We have to actually talk about women in the workplace. And the creative economy is a part of that workplace. And I think the first thing that we need to solve for is care policy. Care policy needs to be economic policy. You cannot expect women to run businesses on 2 hours of sleep and a collapsing household. It doesn't exist. I'm a mom of two, and if there's any mom in here, you know that there needs to be better care policies for caregivers, for elder care. There needs to be tax redemption for caregiving entrepreneurs. I think this would make a world of a difference in actually seeing that shift. Secondly, the power of storytelling, right? Like, as you two very rightly pointed out, and that's something that I do with my content and with my podcast, is I share the stories of women who've been able to bounce back from that no, those 10 no's, those 100 no's, and they've been able to build something of themselves. And when we hear those stories, we feel like we can do this too. We can be this too. There is that possibility of bouncing back from that no. So I do think that the power of storytelling is so, so important. And third, I have to bring it back to that, and I'll be really quick because you know this. But capital from the institutions, long-term capital, fluid capital. Women's lives are not rigid, very flexible. Our lives are like this. I think everyone in the room will agree with me. We need capital that supports that.
Yes, so I have been told we are out of time. I want to give Nabila can you give us one word or maybe 2 words of the kind of policy that you think we should sort of move forward with to close? What can we do?
Honestly, just invest in creatives early while they're alive and living artists.
I love it. Thank you so much. A round of applause for DERYA, MASOOM, and Nabila. This was awesome.
Thank you.
We're going to keep this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to keep this conversation going by inviting our next set of panelists. So we ask that you all just continue to join us as we transition to this next group. We should take a quick photo. Okay.
Take a photo.
Of course. Now we look at Keith. And the professional. One more. Okay, one more. I'm being. I have a
Thank you guys so much. It was
So nice.
amazing.
Thank you so much.
We're gonna bring this panel to other places. So I'll send you all a follow-up note. Okay. If I can have everyone's attention, we're going to move to our next set of panelists in just this moment. So if people have their seats. Continue. If everyone can have their seats, we're going to ask that our next set of panelists join us in 1 second. We're gonna just give people like 10 seconds to settle down, if that's okay. Okay, good morning again. For those who are newly joining us, I am Sally NUAMAH, a professor of political science and social policy who does work on cultural production and the creative economy and gender. And we are super excited to continue this conversation on these really important issues related to creativity, gender, and economics. And so we are going to invite two of our awesome panelists to join us. First, we have with us SARIAN, a founder and executive director and cybersecurity girl. She describes herself as a champion for tech and creative empowerment. Caitlin inspires young women to innovate safely and confidently in the digital economy. So please feel free to have a seat. And if we can please lower our voices a little bit, as this is being recorded. Thank you. Next, we are super excited to have joining us Haley LICKSTEIN, a political and lifestyle influencer, activist, and public speaker. Haley combines advocacy, media, and digital influence to drive awareness and action on social equity and gender equality. So we are very excited to have them both with us. We're gonna have an awesome conversation. And so please. All right. So thank you all so much for being here and just being a part of this discussion. As was mentioned already, the creative economy is something that continues to grow and scale, and gender is an interesting part of that, right? We know that women are playing key and important roles in this space, but we feel and we know that they're not capturing as much of the capital that they could be, right? And so we want to have a little bit of a discussion about that. And so can you talk a little bit about what are these barriers to progress? Why are women struggling to capture aspects of this growing creative economy, even as access to it technically opens up through like digital platforms? What are the barriers? What's happening? Tell us.
Sure, I can jump in. I'm Haley, really excited to be here. I think two things come top of mind for me, and one is a lack of standardization, and the second is we want creators to act like a business, but we don't treat them like a business. And so what do those two things mean? One is in terms of lack of standardization. The algorithms we know have a bias. Data has shown us a bias against women of color, against people with disabilities, against people who they deem might be overweight, and those people receive, they will see their content be dropped in the algorithm or not receive as much engagement, and there is a real reality to that. The second, when it comes to standardization, is pay. So when it comes to inclusion, we don't have a talent problem, we have a capital allocation problem. We saw in 2025 that the top 10% of creators received over 60% of all money going out to creators globally. And so if you are going to be working with content creators, can you be intentional about working with different creators and not the same group of creators that everyone is working with? Can you make sure they're diverse? And then can you standardize your pay? There's been so much work done globally on pay equity, but not when it comes to creator space. It's really very much up to the creator to set their pricing. And so women of color fall significantly behind. And then my last thing on, treating creators like a business, but not giving them that business infrastructure is creators account for over 50 million jobs globally. But the creator job does not include health insurance, does not include retirement, does not include disability or maternity leave. So if we want to see more women in this space, figuring out how you build out the infrastructure so that the creator job can give you what you need to have a sustained career in this space.
Yeah. I might go a little bit different than you. So I actually became a creator because I actually wanted a little bit more of a life. I wanted to be able to have flexible hours and not work a normal 9 to 5. So when I started, I only went on TikTok because that was the platform I wanted to inspire the next generation of women in cyber and also get them excited about how to protect themselves online. And I knew that that's where they're at. So for me, I was the reason why I went on was because I saw so much opportunity. I actually think a lot of women aren't creators because they might be a little afraid of putting themselves out there. And there's also a lot of perfectionists. There's a lot of women that are more aware of how they look. And like you said, there's some biases on certain platforms. For me personally, when I'm in tech, I don't like to show, any skin. I don't want to do anything because I want to be taken seriously. And I think that's another issue that a lot of women are afraid to put themselves out there because you do get bad comments. You do get oh, you're only hired because you're a pretty girl or whatever. And that was something that I was mortified by. So I think there's a few things also from a creator standpoint on making money, women also, I don't feel stand up for themselves as much as men. It's the same as women with jobs, right? We don't apply to jobs that we don't feel qualified for, 100% qualified for. But women are so capable and so qualified. And I actually think being a creator is the best for women because you can have a life outside of work and you don't have to have that 9 to 5, but it's having that confidence and knowing your purpose. And I actually think a lot of women know, secretly have a gut instinct of knowing their purpose, but they're afraid to do anything because, and we just heard earlier about, she was in India and she was 21 years old and they were well, what about, with you being a mom? What are you going to do? And I think being a creator actually allows you to kind of have it all. And so I think just getting that message out there that, you don't have to be perfect. I think the creator life it's completely changed my life. The platform has completely changed my life. And I think just getting that message out there to women that I don't read my comments anymore. I don't know. Do you read your comments? No. So there's certain things I think we just have to maybe have a little bit tougher skin and be really set in our purpose when we are are on our creator journey.
Okay, awesome. Again, another diverse set of responses because you're really talking about the structural barriers, how does a creator have healthcare, right? Which is important for women and creates disparities, but also how can we leverage the fact that there's more flexibility, which may be great for a mother. So I think both of those things are key. I'm going to ask you both questions individually. So Caitlin, I'm going to start with you. And then the creative economy increasingly depends on digital platforms and AI, right? We hear a lot of people talk about the algorithms. From your work in cybersecurity, what risk disproportionately affect women and young creators? And what safeguards should we be thinking about specifically from government to, that we should be prioritizing to prevent that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's risk in any piece of technology, right? There was risk when we first went online. Now there's risk with social media. And then there's also risks with AI. So I just want to blanket statement that there are always going to be risks, but I also think there's going to be a lot of rewards that people don't realize. With AI specifically and the algorithm, I personally haven't experienced any negative things with AI and the algorithm. I think AI is so important for creators because you're able to create scripts and tell them in different ways. And AI allows you to do that and figure that out. So it kind of streamlines your process. The risk is that, I'm a data privacy expert. So I did data privacy for 8 years before I started getting into doing social media. And I understand that there's a lot of privacy risks when it comes to inputting your data. And actually most of the people that follow me are women. I think it's 50 to 60% are women. And it's a lot of moms that are worried about protecting their families online. So I think the risk is really with AI ingesting so much data, what could happen with that? And for me, I think a lot of people are oh, my privacy's dead. I don't get any privacy. But for me, it's okay, privacy's not dead. But I want you to think about every time that you're putting stuff on platforms because it's going to be run through a system and those systems are actually going to create conclusions about you. Yeah. And you won't have knowledge about that conclusion, but it will impact you in some way, shape, or form down the line. So I always am just like, be mindful of what you post, because like you don't know right now what it could do in the future. Just like with journalists, they didn't know that their stuff was going to be training AI.
Exactly.
And now AI sounds like a lot of journalists, and they're like, well, I never knew 10 years ago when I was posting online that my work was going to be taken without my consent.
Right.
So like, we really don't know what AI is going to do with our data and our privacy, but just know that it's forming conclusions, and what you do online today is going to impact you in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's great. So Haley, as we're getting to ready to wrap up, I really want to make sure we understand this really important question about, which is connected to your work. So social media plays such a central role, right, in shaping political and economic discourse increasingly. How can digital influence be harnessed, right? How can we use that to promote equality without deepening polarization?
It's a great question. And I know we're wrapping up, but I'm really quickly, just on the safety, really fast, is I think it is the most pressing issue facing women online, or making sure we have women's voices. We are seeing increased harassment, doxing, deep fakes. Look at everything happening with Grok right now, and then the response from technology. So if we want to be able to see women's voices continue to be present online, we need to demand some sort of change there. But when it comes to polarization, the technology wasn't built for equity. It wasn't built to create democracy. It was built to drive division, because it rewards content that continues you being engaged longer, which is something that most of that content evokes some sort of emotion. It's polarizing. It's created for sensationalized content. And so while we might not be able to control the algorithm, we can control what content we engage with, and that the content that we choose to engage with represents the very best of what is put out on social media, where there is the ability to democratize voice, to hear stories, and people have microphones that wouldn't have had them typically. And so I'm a true believer that we don't need to kind of silence our social media, but rather build social media that is much more impact driven, and we have the ability to teach that that's what we want to see.
I love that. I think that's an excellent way for us to close. Please join us in giving a round of applause to Caitlin and Haley. Thank you.